Good morning. This is Catherine Tillett at Kentucky Department of Education. Hopefully you all can hear me if you're dialed in. This is our sort of quarterly Interconnected Systems Framework Community of Practice, and we're here today with our Interconnected Systems Framework leadership team and our partners from GREC Special Education Cooperative, Kathy Maciel and Lisa Logue, who are going to walk us through information on resource mapping today, because we know that's a pretty intimidating topic sometimes, but they've got it down and they can tell us how it's worked for them. And so we'll just get started. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning. This is Kathy Maciel. We're here to talk you through, and I would like to see and invite we have two districts that has really been working through this process with us and kind of leading us in a way as well. We have a school from Warren County, and who is on the call? I can't see who is on the call, so can you all share if you have joined us? From Warren County, Bristow.
I guess the first question is,
yes, can you all hear?
I can hear you.
Okay. All right. Stacy, Sarah, anyone else from Warren County, are you all on the call?
This is Sarah. I'm here.
Okay. Thanks, Sarah. So just wanted to introduce her, and she will be sharing with us later, but I invite you to jump in anytime, Sarah, as well. So when we're looking at the Interconnected Systems Framework of PBIS and mental health, you all are very aware of the core features. So highlighted here, you need your effective teams, determining your readiness and analyzing and improving your current multi-tiered systems framework, identifying those professional learning needs and resources, and have that database decision making so that we can link those evidence-based practices in those tiered systems. And then again, developing your integrated action plan. So a big part of resource mapping is having these key features here: professional development, available resources, evidence-based practices, the accountability data system, and effective team meetings. So basically, what is our map for success as we begin to interconnect these tiered systems of support? So today when we talk about resource mapping, this is just the process to link our regional, our community, and our school resources so that we have all stakeholders at the table, and also engaging those families into the process and addressing the needs of our students. So if we look at that broader definition, it basically, mapping focuses on the communities. What do the communities have to offer? How do we identify the assets and resources that we have in reach? It's not just about just having that one populated list, a directory. It's about really digging deep. What is within our reach, within our community? What resources do we have available? What resources do we need? It's about that joint planning and that professional development, that resource, and the cost sharing. One entity, one agency cannot address this alone. So again, why do we need to resource map? Well, many of our youth and our family and our school-based staff, we're not aware of what resources we have available to us. And we also, they may not know how to access those resources. Community partners, they're not always aware of what the school's doing. The schools are not always aware of the resources and even how to access the resources from our community with our community, from our community partners. So we have to, part of resource mapping is building those school community partnerships. So the benefits of resource mapping helps us to really just identify and organize those resources that we have, improve our access. So if we have those resources readily available, we can provide that early intervention. We can address the needs early on instead of later. We can duplicate when we're aligning those initiatives and resources. We can avoid the duplication of services and resources. Sometimes in schools, we'll see school-based therapists or come in and work with students, and we may be doing the same thing with the students. So we're working in silos, but we're working on the same goals and targets. So we can certainly get more bang for our buck, I guess you might say, if we are aligning those and all being on the same page. Again, enhancing the services. How do we know, are we really using the evidence-based practices that work, not just from the school side, but from the community resource side? Are we, again, with that teaming process, are we using the evidence-based practices that work for the needs that we are addressing? And then pulling all of that data to make the informed decisions. Where do we go next with the student? And enhancing that communication and collaboration across the agencies and programs. Oftentimes, we can find out, even from the school perspective, we can find out a wealth of information from those providers who are providing services to our students. So it's important, again, that we have that collaboration. So when we're looking at resource mapping, and those of you who have been implementing and using the ISF framework, you know that the best tool that we have is the implementation workbook. It literally just guides you through this process, as well as the TFI companion guide. It goes through those the core features of the tiered systems, and it gives you those big ideas. And what does this look like when you're interconnecting mental health within your schools? Another resource that we're looking at, or a tool, is if we're looking at the implementation framework, the hexagon. It's if you're looking to explore a new program and looking at how does what we're doing now, and what we have in existence, how does that fit with our needs? And it's a tool that will guide you through that process and beginning that explanation of just looking at what is our need and identifying, does this fit? When we're action planning, what evidence do we have, that we have the evidence-based practices in place? And then what supports do we need for that? So that's another tool. Also in the implementation workbook, there is, it's small, but if you can see at the top of the screen, the Midwest PBIS, they recommend the resource mapping workbook from the University of Maryland. Well, this has now changed, and there is a partnership they are now offering. It's called the SHAPE system. I don't know a lot about it. I do think that we have a couple of people that are on this team that are visiting this week with this group, and hopefully they can tell us more about it. But it's with a partnership with the National Center for School and Mental Health, and go in and look at this. I mean, it offers a system that guides you through the teaming, the screening, and assessment. And from my understanding is you decide that you want to use this system, you have access to their resources as well. So that is just another tool that's out there. So basically, when we're beginning the exploration for the resource mapping, we start looking at, we're looking at the community. We're looking at our data and our resources in the community. We're looking at the data and the resources within our district, then within our school, and then down to the student when we're identifying our needs. So this is what this may look like. So when we're exploring need, what is some of the community data that we're looking at? You know, how many families in our region or district, how many of those are homeless? How many families are accessing the food pantry? Calls and visits to the health crisis center? Number of youth arrested and why? You know, what are those charges? What are we seeing? And just looking at our community demographics. You know, what's some of the district data that we use and we access? Suspensions, graduation rates, dropout rates, universal screening data, you know, the climate perception data, student voice. And then looking at the school and the student data, attendance, grades, office, discipline referrals, suspensions, visits to school nurse, et cetera. And I'll just kind of pause here for a minute, and from those of you on the calls, what other kinds of data are you using or thinking about when we look at this? Would anyone like to share? As a former EBD teacher, my wait time is pretty good. Okay, so we'll continue moving on, and as we continue talking, and we also have Diana Green-Kidd, who is with us today too, and she has really helped us identify this from the very beginning in our GREC region and our work with the promoting positive mental health about what kinds of data we have access to. So we'll just move to the next slide, Catherine. Oh, let's get this on. So one great resource is going to the KDE website, the open house. Looking at the report cards, you know, looking at accountability data, assessment data. You can get student health data, the learning environment. So great resource, one-stop shop for finding out some district data. Other resources to access data is we have the KIP survey, which gives a profile, and you'll see that in the middle. It kind of shows trends, and then it shows with the X's of declines in those trends. So that is one source for data, the Kids Count Data Center. Looking at there's Safe Schools each year. These are this is updated annually, looking at discipline referrals, suspensions, behavior resolutions. It also gives a wealth of data, and then again the school safety. Another source, our Cabinet for Health and Family Services, Department of Behavioral Health, Developmental Intellectual Disabilities, through DCBS, looking at out-of-home placements. What do those look like in our region? So when we're thinking about our regional community data, you know, what does this look like? How can this be helpful for us? So here's just a little snippet of an example from one of our districts, and they are showing a decline in trended data in out-of-home placements, and then children living in high poverty. So what are those implications for our students? So, you know, we know 50% of children welfare system have mental health problems. 57% youth with mental health problems come from households living at or below federal poverty level. We know that it has impact on the physiological, social, emotional, and cognitive development. So we know that just these two things increase those risk factors for our students. So then as we're action planning with our team, and maybe we're developing those social emotional learning programs at our universal level, what is that, what do we need in place to address those within our district? So with your action plan, and do we have a student identification system in place? Trauma-informed care, youth mental health, social emotional learning. So just helping us look at what do we have in place, what do we need to have in place when we are resource mapping. Other resources for supports, on the left are court-designated workers, and then out of our AOC, the Administrative Office of the Courts, they put out resource directories as well. You may contact your regional interagency council, your REACTS, which is combined of several different agencies. That's certainly a resource. And then I know just kind of in our region with our work, we have worked on just a resource guide that we have shared. So lots of avenues for resources. The next valuable resource when you're resource mapping is your regional educational cooperative, as well as your community and state partners. So I know just in our region, we do our own resource mapping. We look at, as we are working with our districts to interconnect those frameworks and with PBIS and mental health, social emotional learning, trauma-informed care, what do we offer and what do we need? And are we training evidence-based practices? Do we have the evidence for the effectiveness? And what is our plan? So just looking at our own regional resource mapping. So then as we work down from the community and then the district, we look at just within the district. So if you're looking at that umbrella, I'd like to just give an example from one of our schools, Barron County. So they are just still exploring this ISF framework within their district, but what they do have a mental health coordinator, Shauna Sharper. I'm not sure if she can make it with us today, but she has developed her a resource, a mental health website for her district. So she's just presented some of the resource mapping and data analysis that they've used for Barron County that's led to their initial or implementation or enhancement. So they
Kathy,
work with, yes.
this is Stacy. There's some feedback that's making it a little hard to hear you. So I don't know if some people don't have their volume muted or their mic muted. But it's just making it a little hard to hear. Sorry.
So if you are on, if you have background noise and you're on the call, if you could just mute your microphone and then unmute it when you would like to join the conversation, that would be very helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Stacy, for letting us know. So these are just some examples of what they have been implementing and the resource mapping that they have done and the resources that they have put together for their district. And again, they are collaborating with their community mental health center with life skills, and they continue to build that partnership as well, and working with 13 mental health providers. So again, just having those resources available within their district. So I'm going to let Lisa, my partner here, Lisa Loeb, she's going to talk to us about our other district implementation or lead that discussion.
Yeah, so good morning, and we'll kind of take just a breather for a second and make sure if you have any questions or things that you would like to address a little bit further, you're typing that in the chat box. We'll try to monitor that so that we can kind of revisit during the end, but also feel free to unmute yourself and interject at any time if you have some items to share with us. So as a first district sample shared with us, they kind of took all that community data, the district data, started digging into the school and student data as well, but also noticing that once you start with kind of the big picture or vision and begin aligning that with your goals, you really have to have a process for carrying you through the resource mapping. So part of the things that we would recommend are making sure that this is conducted annually and it's linked very directly to your action planning, and annually is at best practice minimum. So we really kind of recommend that a formal resource mapping and action planning is done annually, but we revisit that at least quarterly with our teams, with our PBIS or ISF teams, or however we've designated that process. And the idea is to make sure that we're identifying all of the existing interventions that we already have going on in our schools, using the available data sources, as Kathy mentioned, from all sources, and making sure that if it is going to be implemented system-wide, we realize that that means that we're implementing at all tiers and making sure that all tiers are connecting with one another. And then we start to ask ourselves questions, and so we look at the interventions that we have in place and we ensure that they're actually addressing the needs that are identified from the data that we're seeing. Oftentimes we're implementing interventions because we've been doing it for a long time, and so this is the time that we can kind of evaluate that process within our schools and our districts. And then at the same time we're looking for gaps. We're analyzing that data to determine, you know, are we missing some important things? Is the community data telling us that we need some particular support in the school that we could be adopting? And then also we're always looking at, of course, what are the barriers that we're going to encounter as we're engaged in this process, and we've got to problem solve at that time. So if there are barriers, how are we actually going to develop some specific strategies to address those challenges that we might have? So we always kind of lean back to the graphic image of the triangle because that helps us envision the importance of interconnecting each tier. We want to make sure that we know that each tier is not independent of the system, but rather it all connects together. Also knowing that we start with the universal or the core instruction, whether we're talking about positive behavior supports, social emotional learning, mental health, the trauma, all the pieces that we're connecting together, and hoping that 80 to 90% at minimum of our students are experiencing success there. So you can kind of see on the right-hand side the behavioral systems, some of the areas that generally schools or districts might identify as interventions at that point. And we know that you must have a very strong universal or core system to prevent new problems from occurring. So we really encourage strengthening and enhancing the supports at that level based on the data. That being said, we know that we're going to have some students that aren't responding positively to those interventions and supports, and so we hope to support them with Tier 2 or our secondary interventions. These would be small group or individuals that have similar goals to others in the building so that we can do some sort of quick response with them. And then of course our high-risk students needing a more individualized or intensive intervention would be met with Tier 3 supports. And so our linkage in thinking about ISF and interconnected systems framework is make sure that we have mental health supports at all three levels to address any types of problem behaviors. So we kind of shared in there a little bit of work that we like to encourage districts to dig into initially to say, hey, we just need to get a big picture of what we have going on in our schools and districts. So what you see before you right now is just an activity we recently did with a district where we had actually elementary, middle school, and high school and tried to kind of help them start aligning that across the district. Very interesting to see that when we begin that process, oftentimes schools kind of put to the back side exactly what they have in place, and they forget they've got some really, really strong pieces that maybe they could pull back out of the toolbox and expand to meet the ever-increasing needs that we have. And so that just kind of shows you a way. Some chose to do it in a T-chart, some chose to do it with the triangle, some drew a little pathway, but the whole idea was for them to build something that worked for their school team that they could take back to their stakeholders, their faculty and staff, their families, and even their students to get further feedback as they began that resource mapping process. So in the ISF implementation workbook, one of the tools that we really favor is taking the idea of the big picture and the vision and really begin to intervention map at all three levels. So the very first thing that you would do is use a tool that's going to help you to organize and align the interventions at each of the tiers.
They're still getting a lot of feedback on the call. Can you check in with people about that?
Yes,
Maybe
okay.
You can turn off their computer mic and also phone mic.
Yeah. So thank you. Catherine's kind of moderating for us from the other side of the room, and we're understanding there's still some feedback. We're not getting that here at our session, so I'll just ask one more time if you'll make sure that your mics are muted and help us make sure that everybody can adequately hear the session that we're engaged in. So just one more check, and especially if you're calling from a phone or something like that, if you'll make sure volume's down and we're not getting that feedback. So thank you for those to respond. It's, I know, most frustrating if something's going on and you can't hear what's going on. So anyways, the tool that's before you right now is just a really great way not to just look at the interventions, the strategies, the supports like I showed in the previous slide, but to break it down and start asking yourself, what are the expected outcomes that we have from our students? So now we're really digging down deeper. Who's going to facilitate this support or this intervention? Is it coming within the school? Is this one of our community partners? So this is a great tool to be able to list everything that we have in there. And then what are our decision rules? How are we determining when this intervention is actually appropriate and meeting the student needs? How are we going to know when they're going into intervention? How are we going to progress monitor? How are we going to know when they're ready to fade or come out of the intervention? And then it also gives us a really great way to track how many students that we have participating in each of these interventions. We want to make sure, as I said before, that our Tier 1 interventions are supporting a minimum of 80% of our student population. And then we look at the progress and then also making sure that the intervention support strategy that's being used is an evidence-based practice and making sure that it's actually implemented with fidelity. So oftentimes we say that one of these supports is not working for the students, but we need to always go back and look at our adult practices and behaviors first to make sure that we are implementing with fidelity. So once you use a tool like this, you can actually start to identify the gaps that you see. And so you start kind of sharing the pieces of data that are suggesting the success at each of the tiers. And then you want to go back and actually revise or refine that. So this is what we have, but with our current resource mapping, are there things out there that we're not actually implementing in our context that might benefit our student need? So we kind of start with that piece, we identify our gaps, and then we return to it and revise and refine that as needed. A tool that's kind of helpful in the process as we're moving along is the ISF Implementation Inventory. It is made to serve kind of an efficient, valid assessment of ISF implementation, because this helps us to determine the amount of fidelity that we have in each of those core features. So this is a really great tool to use in conjunction as we're resource mapping. They're also kind of highlighted in there. It's aligned to the tiered fidelity inventory, but it allows you, when you're looking back to that data, the items that are what we would consider green or with no highlight are the items that we feel in our building are being implemented with fidelity. The yellow, of course, for our school and district would designate the need that something we might to take a look at. It might be a quick fix. It might be an implementation of an initiative that we can put in place pretty quickly for some new student needs. And then in the red would be something that maybe we're not investing in our school at this time, and so we want to really compare that with our data to determine whether we're going to prioritize that as a need. So that kind of works hand in hand with the resource mapping. Another thing is to make sure that schools that are implementing PBIS, and even if you're not, anybody can access the tiered fidelity inventory. So with ISF, the TFI Companion Guide does an excellent job to help us in guiding that action planning from our resource mapping. It gives us the interconnected systems framework big idea, so it gives us that initial vision of linking the mental health supports to what we already have in place for our positive behavior systems, and then it gives us that enhancement. So this tool is not intended to be reflected in the tiered fidelity inventory scoring, but rather give us a picture of what it means to actually implement the mental health alongside at all tiers. So you'll notice this particular example on teaching expectations is a Tier 1 core feature of PBIS. So it gives us that mental health enhancement. So just another great tool to be able to use as your resource mapping. So as Kathy mentioned, we're featuring a couple of districts, and she did some speaking about Barron County. So Warren County Public Schools has been recognized for many of their PBIS accomplishments over the years. They did a really fabulous job in the beginning looking at that community data, and even more specifically district data, school data, to say, hey, it's time that we bring in something else. We need more for our students to meet their needs. So as a district, they've used PBIS framework as kind of the backbone to bring the mental health forward. So that being said, they established some district goals in the past couple of years that are being responded to now. So increasing awareness of trauma-informed practices and trauma awareness across all stakeholders within the schools, making sure that they are focused on equity practices as it responds to discipline, and embedding opportunities around social emotional learning. And we all know really positive behavior supports is the basis for social emotional learning. It is creating your own curriculum around that and bringing resources in as you need them. So those district goals based on the resource mapping are what is kind of leading them to their very specific action planning. So the action plan is developed and refined always at the beginning of the school year, but revisited at each district team meeting. And so within that action plan, they continually assess the data to determine any refinements or revisions. And so the action plan is actually going to reflect what that vision or what the goals are initially. So kind of making that linkage to each of the items. And then I'll just kind of introduce, and I think, Sarah, if you're not getting too much feedback and you're able to share a little information, I know we have Sarah Baker from Bristow Elementary on the line, and Stacy from Warren County Public Schools from a district perspective, so we'd be happy for you to kind of interject here. but they are one of our ISF pilot schools and have been implementing PBIS for quite some time, and so might be able to share a little bit about some of the items that they've been doing.
Good morning. This is Sarah Baker, and I hope Stacy's unmuting her mic as well. I'm going to apologize in advance because our district is out today, and I'm off, and my 3-year-old is sitting beside me. So at any time, you may hear a random question asked. But this has been it's been a really eye-opening experience, first of all, just going through this process. And we are very much in the infancy stage of implementation. But it's really, I guess, just kind of recognizing what we are doing, but then putting some very specific things in place to help kind of strengthen our Tier 1 processes, as well as our Tier 2 and Tier 3. And I think we've had some success this year, looking at our data as far as office referrals and things like that. We can a decrease. I haven't looked at any type of data as far as our mental health referrals and that type of thing is to see if there's been a significant decrease there. But some of the things that we've done this year that we've had a lot of positive feedback on has been our school-wide second steps implementation. And you can see that there on our action plan that that was one of the very first things Stacy and I kind of joined in forces together is to get that school-wide. And I feel like our teachers were hungry for something because they recognized the need in our students and in our community, that they just did not have they didn't have the skills to deal with some of the trauma they were facing, some of the holes in their own social emotional learning. And so second steps implementation, we started out, Stacy, how many did we start out with? 2?
We started out with 3 last year, 3 teachers.
3.
So, and then we went from that to school-wide, and we purchased enough kits so the teachers had those resources available. So we did great from last year. Last year's was, but this year I think your teachers have really bought in, and I feel like that they had the trauma-informed a 3-hour training, and I think that helped them see the need for the social-emotional. They kind of, and plus just the behaviors they were seeing.
They were definitely, I think the trauma-informed training helped them see, okay, so what we're seeing here, these big behaviors, these outbursts and things that we're seeing, those are, trauma-related or most likely trauma-related. So they were very hungry to get something in their hands that helped with this whole process. And the funny thing is the kids were hungry for it as well. I think they like learning these things, the barking dog, and they just to kind of give them some tools they didn't know they needed. But beyond second steps, we know that relationships are extremely important. So we've done several things within our building to strengthen our relationships with kids and our most intense kids. We have a Boys to Men and Leading Ladies group for our 5th and 6th grade. We have some 4th graders that are involved. But those are some targeted students that we recognize through teacher recommendation that needed some extra support, some extra guidance. So we meet once a week with those kids. The boys dress pants and ties, and the girls are in professional dress as well, and they have a strand of pearls that they have to wear every week. But we target real things that are going on within our school. So if I've seen a group of girls that week for some mean girl behavior, we stop and we talk about that behavior and how we could have headed it off, and how many others have seen the same thing or been through the same thing, and kind of learning from what's really going on. If there's been a fight, a physical fight, we'll stop and we'll talk about, maybe not that specific incident, but the surrounding causes. And we also teach from Ron Clark's Essential 55, and get those kind of core things in play, or kind of get those out there to the kids and practice those things. But it's really instilling a sense of pride and belonging with those students who need the most. Something else that we've been doing this year that has been very good in establishing relationships is the house system. I know it's kind of the buzzword around Warren County, but we as a school went down to Ron Clark Academy in Atlanta back this past summer and decided that we really wanted to implement the house system in our school. And that's where we divided all students, 3rd grade through 6th grade, into 8 houses. Every staff member is in a house as well. And so you belong to this family. And, the kids all the kids from each house. So I'm in the house of Revere, and all of my kids get to eat lunch together on Team Tuesdays. So I sit with my kids on Tuesdays. The other adults in the building who belong to our house, we all sit together. We all talk, and we sit together in the mornings while we're waiting for the bell to ring. And if somebody, gets in trouble, we're able to talk to them and kind of bond with them. But it's not just me. There are lots of other adults in our house, and that has been huge. It's been huge for accountability, but it's been huge for just the kids belonging to something. They all have their house shirts that they wear with pride, and we have our celebrations on Friday where the kids come down. They do their house chants for points. They spin the wheel. They slide down the slide. We have a 2-story slide in our grand hall we installed, but it's just been a great experience. But all these things kind of together has really helped us push our relationships together and bond with kids that might not have had anybody, might have slipped through the cracks. But I think that combined with some of the social emotional learning, we also have some school-wide mindfulness strategies that we've implemented this year. We have Mindfulness Mondays. Mindfulness Monday starts out in our morning meeting, and I get up and present one of our school-wide mindfulness strategies. So we have hot chocolate breathing. I'm standing in front of the camera like you all can see me right now. So we have our hot chocolate breathing where we practice, how to, if we have a big emotion, how we hot chocolate breathe to take care of that. And we have about 5 school-wide. I started out with an introduction, and then we've moved on to different challenges. So currently we're doing a family challenge where the kids can video themselves either demonstrating or a scenario where they would use one of our 5 mindfulness strategies. So we've been showing those in morning meeting and sharing those out with the staff so they can use those in their lessons as well. So the students leave our Mindfulness Mondays, and then they go up to their classrooms and start their second steps lessons, because we have that first 20 minutes of the day in our master schedule carved out for social emotional learning. They can use their second steps lesson, their big lesson on Monday, and the follow-up lessons every day. So we actually built social emotional learning time into our master schedule. And so far we've seen a lot of success. We realize, Stacy and I are sitting here kind of chatting back and forth during some of these slides saying, oh my goodness, we need to do that. Oh my goodness, we need to do that. But I think, we're at a good place, at a good start. I've been rambling, Stacy, so please.
I was there. I think that it can be an overwhelming process to start. So I know some of the slides that you guys have went through with our 30, 60, and 90-day plan kind of helped us be able to break down and make things easier to do and not so overwhelming. So that was just something that I don't know that where we got that. I think Sarah had that. I don't know that we got that out of the implementation guide, but it helped us be able to get things started. And we know, just like Sarah said, we know we've got a long ways to go, but we feel like that we've got a good start.
Yeah, I think that's a great tool to use in accompanying the resource mapping, and I love the idea that we know we're successful when, and outlining those targets for the adults to meet the needs of the students. And for sure, Sarah, you said, I think we've gotten off to a great start. You certainly have, and I think what's most admirable is that you didn't just jump to high risk, but are really doing things for all kids that are going to support those mental health needs from Tier 1, so that is fabulous. We also kind of noted in there you're very conscientious about your agenda and meeting notes and kind of following through so that you always have that documentation that reflects, you know, what you really identified as that need. And then we might just invite you to go ahead and speak about one more thing, and that was your idea of bringing your collaborative partners from the community in for your mental health supports. So that's up on the screen now. If you don't mind to just share a little bit about that with us.
Absolutely. So as part of our kind of first goals, it was to get our community partners in, involve them more in our process. And this has kind of been the part where it's been the most challenging for several different reasons. You know, it's that control, first of all, that we have as you know, administrators and as schools, that, you know, we don't want to let go of that control and invite others in. But it's been one of the most rewarding. We had our first community resource meeting. Was that back in like July, Stacey?
July 24th. It's on our flyer.
It's on the flyer there. Yes, July 24th. So we invited several of the mental health agencies from our community into our school just for a very informal, quick meeting, just to say, okay, this is what we're doing, and this is what we're hoping to do this year, and it's how we want you on board. And we just basically said we wanted to be able to share thoughts, ideas, and data with them. And you know, I think at first they didn't really know what they were getting into, and we didn't either, but we were able to kind of break down some barriers that had existed between the school and mental health agencies, because, you know, I don't know about in the other counties, but in Warren County there's always been kind of an us and them kind of feeling, because we're, you know, they sometimes are wanting to come in our building and see kids, and we don't have the space or the time, and we're always worried about privacy issues. But then it was really nice to be able to say, okay, let's join forces. Let's do what's best for kids. And along the way, you know, it's been a great thing, because we're making sure that we get those releases signed for kids more often. You know, I share a lot of our ARCs, and I sit in with a lot of the families that have mental health referrals, and I make sure that when we move forward with any type of counseling or anything, that we get those signed releases where we can join forces with them. Thank you. She just let everybody know that she turned her iPad down. Sorry about that, guys. But we had our next meeting, and Stacey, you're going to have to help me with that date. Was it back in November? Does that sound right?
I think so.
I think it was November. We had our kind of first meeting during the year, and we were able to present our data, our office referral data, and said, okay, remember, this is what we said we were going to do. This is what we said we were going to get rolling this year. You know, here we are now. So we were able to present our significant decrease in behavior data to them. So we were able to show that, okay, it's working. We've been able to get these things in place and it's working. This is what we've got. What do you see as the mental health community? And I'm leaving out the fact that we've also incorporated a family member into our team as well. So it was a very interesting reflection as far as, our parents saying, I wish I knew more about this at home. I didn't even know you guys were doing this, or I didn't even know you guys were doing that. I wish I knew what topics you all were learning about along the way so I could reinforce that at home. So it's just been a really eye-opening experience, and I can't express enough that we're very much in the infancy stage of this process, but I feel like it's been a great start, just getting people together and kind of breaking down those barriers and really of open and honest conversation. And something else, I kind of want to rewind. I think it was Lisa who was talking, it might have been Kathy, was talking about REACT. Stacey and I had...
Yes, that's what I wanted to share. Go ahead.
Stacey and I had a chance to go to, it was actually our ISF team, I think Laura Morrow went with us as well, to a REACT meeting, and I was just blown away by that. I was like, wow, this is such an awesome time, because they were sharing, I can't remember if it was just juveniles, but I'm thinking it was just juvenile information as far as, arrest and mental health and things like that. And the data that was reflected in our schools almost mirrored across the state. So that was very interesting, the some of the issues and things that were presenting in elementary school were the same issues and trends that they were seeing across the state in juveniles. And Stacey, do you remember, is that adult data as well, or was it just juvenile?
It was juvenile. I think it was juvenile justice. It's a fair team.
Data for the fair team.
But it was such a great invite, and that's an opportunity that I don't think we would have had we not had our community partners in our building and just joining forces together, because we were able to join forces and listen in and take note of some of the current issues that they were seeing and some of the resources that they had. It's just really been able to open some doors for us that we didn't even know were there.
So that was just so powerful, because we have been working, and with our REACT, working on this, interconnecting the mental health of PBIS for years, and have trained together, discussed together, but this really brought it home was, Bristow, was them coming in to our REACT and sharing, this is what it looks like, and this is data. And so that's what really bridged that connection. And it also showed that Warren County has their school-based mental health system, but Bristow, they are looking even beyond that of bringing in those community agencies in other aspects, in other ways, as well as the families. So that was, and I've like hearing your perspective on that as well from the school. This is what bridges this and makes this connection and shows what this looks like. ISF is just not, sometimes we think of it as being out there on its own island. This is just the process. ISF is just the process, the framework of bridging these resources together. So, yeah, they did a fantastic job.
I think it's important to note, too, that we merged our ISF and our PBIS team. We still have our core ISF team, but we merged those meetings. And we had the summer meeting, but we only started this year with a late fall meeting, and then we are getting ready to have our second meeting with the community just to help us takes little steps rather than jumping completely, in. It just helps, I think, build those relationships and get us to where we need to be. So slow and steady, I think, and consistent is one of the things that we've really tried to do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I might add, too, those district meetings are including mental health, but they're also including other community members, for example, a member of the Muslim community, as well as from the university level as well. So really trying to get all perspectives at the table to assist with meeting all these needs.
Okay. Thank you all so much. Are there any questions from anyone on the call? Anything that you would like to ask while we have Sarah and Stacy on the phone, or any of the other team members here?
Great job. Mm-hmm. Very nice. Well, if there are no further questions or anything, and thanks for those that were putting a few items there in the chat box, to reach out to your regional co-op, KDE, your districts. We're all trying to be partners in this work and do what's best for all. So an enormous thank you, and Sarah, your sweet little 3-year-old was perfect.
Thank you all, and we'll reconnect in May. Appreciate it.
Thank you.